Hey everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I am finally talking about the new Yamaha NS-600A bookshelf speaker. I'm really excited to talk about these because I've been using them for a couple months now, and I actually got to speak to some of the Yamaha people when I went to Expo a couple months ago. In addition to hearing and learning about these, they had the other speakers set up as well. So this is the NS-600A, which is $1,500 a speaker, $3,000 a pair, but then they also have the NS-800A, which is a slightly larger bookshelf, and then the NS-2000A, which is a floor standing speaker. They sound great in their own ways. I'm going to get into all of that, but I wanted to start by saying this is the smallest of the lineup. So if I'm starting to talk about certain things or you're concerned with specs or power handling, just know that you can get similar tonality but a little bit more bass and power handling overall if your room is larger and you need it. Now obviously with a $3,000 sticker price, they are in the higher end category, and I will be comparing it to a more expensive bookshelf from Alta Audio. I have the Alyssa's as well, in addition to the Bowers & Wilkins S606s, the S2s, not the 3s, and just some general tonality comparisons later. But at $3,000 for the smallest bookshelf, you do not get any speaker stands. So that's normal for a bookshelf, but keep that in mind if you are trying to consider where you're, placing them. They do sell a matching or designed speaker stand to go with it. Now those are the SPS 800As. They stand at 25 inches tall. They have a very large MDF base, and they even have included floor spikes, of course. So if you have thicker carpet, you can still give them a proper anchor to the ground because that's really important for your sound quality. Now those guys aren't cheap either. Those speaker stands are $700 each, not for the pair. So two stands, almost the price of one of these bookshelves. It adds up. I don't want to get into the whole, is it going to make a massive difference on sound quality? I think a speaker stand should have a very stable foundation. They should place your speaker at the appropriate height for where your seating position is, and you don't want the stands to have any of their own resonance issues. So part of what you're paying for with this is the design and the materials used to not resonate. They are fully assembled, so I am pleased about the unboxing experience. It was as seamless as it could be. I opened up a box, there's a box within a box, and then I literally just unwrapped the stand, set it down. Same process with the speaker, and I place it right on top. So it is nice that it's fully assembled. That's one of the perks behind it. But I have used other speaker stands that are a bit less expensive. They require a lot more work to set up. I've used the Pangea 400s to mount different speakers. They're taller, but those have a lot of ringing and like a ping to it. They're hollow metal stands, so you have to fill them with something. So I had to dry out some sand and just to get rid of the resonance issues. I'm not saying that to justify or say go one path or the other, but there are things to consider when you're shopping speaker stands. It's not like this is just more because it's Yamaha versus another brand, but just factor all of that stuff in. I think the most important takeaway though is to make sure it has a proper foundation to your floor and that it puts the speaker at the appropriate height, because that's going to be very important for your imaging. Now the driver arrangement is pretty straightforward on the NS-600A, and they get larger or higher in quantity as you move up. So this guy uses a 5¼ inch driver. It's a blend of Xylon and spruce. They say that it's designed for a proper tonal balance, but ideally what you want from a cone structure is to have a minimal amount of distortion or diffraction. You don't want the cone to flex in any way, but you also want it to be extremely light because you want it to be very responsive to the transients from the motor structure trying to produce your sound. There is some insane magic that happens inside these cabinets. Now these weigh a lot. They are not lightweight speakers, and part of that has to do with the material choice of the cabinet. It's very inert, which helps because you don't want your cabinet to be resonant in any way, because that introduces other issues with sound. So there's a lot of stuff put into the cabinet itself as far as the chamber goes and isolating different frequencies, and that includes a resonance chamber behind the tweeter. It's not like the tweeter's just mounted on the front baffle and it's either sealed or open in the back. They have this insane tube looking system that I got to see at the show that was really, really surprising. And I always try to avoid tying marketing lingo or features that a lot of stuff you see in marketing literature that it guarantees something to sound a certain way. They obviously have their reasons about using an acoustic chamber, and a lot of that has to do with removing unwanted resonances or frequency artifacts that can, again, color or ruin the preciseness of sound reproduction and imaging performance. So It does work. I'm leading into the sound, but they also have this acoustic tube inside, which it honestly looks like an insane like cardboard type texture, like a blend of cardboard and wood. It's a U shape, and again, that is tuned through computer modeling and engineering experience to magnify or fill the mid bass and lower bass as well, and again deal with resonance issues, because you want a linear frequency response. You don't want all these rises and dips that basically produce music in different ways depending on what you're listening to. So you want something consistent and reliable, but also accurate. There's a lot going on behind the speaker too. There's something called the twisted flare port, which by twisting it, it shapes the air coming in and out of the speaker. That helps with port chuffing. And even on the inside of the tube, it's lined with this like soft fleece material. So there is a blend of a little bit of dampening. They actually didn't fill the box with dampening. They used those tubes and acoustic tuning things I was talking about earlier to handle resonances without just stuffing it with polyfill, for example. And the reason why they do that is they want a certain amount of liveliness to still come from the speaker. So get rid of resonance, but don't dampen the hell out of it in order to do so. And that's been a core philosophy behind this lineup and why it costs so much more. There's a lot of engineering behind everything inside. Even the terminals are gorgeous. It has these solid brass binding posts. They are huge. They unscrew to handle exposed copper wire, but I also just use banana plugs, no problem. And they just, every single part that you touch or interact with feels super premium all the way down to the terminals. The power handling is actually quite similar with the NS-600A and 800A. It's 40 watts nominal and 120 max power. They use the same tweeter size, but the NS-800A steps up into a 6.5-inch driver on the bottom instead of a 5.25. It's really, even though the wattage is the same, the difference that I heard at the show is you're going to have a little bit more mid-bass warmth and power handling in the lower frequencies. It extends just slightly lower, not drastically. These do still have quite a bit of bass extension, but it's better suited a little bit towards larger rooms. It really just depends on your space. Now my room, this studio, is about 21, 22 feet long, and then going this way, it's kind of like an L shape is another 20 feet, and then it tapers down to about 16. So there is still quite a lot of airspace in here, and I have a 12-foot ceiling, and this being their smaller speaker is more than enough power and depth in here. I don't feel like I needed a lot more. If you're really chasing those sub-bass frequencies with either of these bookshelves, you're probably going to want a subwoofer anyway. But power handling wasn't an issue even on a larger space like this. Now getting into sound quality, I want to start with imaging performance first, because that's the first thing you're going to notice with these as long as you properly set them up. These are easily the most cohesive and widely staged bookshelves I have ever heard in this price range, and it's not by a little bit. It is shocking how expansive these speakers sound. Again, placement is super important, but it happened in the demo room when I went to the show, and I heard, I don't know, maybe 60 to 80 pairs of speakers that day or two. This was a standout on imaging performance. I don't care if the speaker was $50,000. There is something just absolutely ridiculous about how these are blended. I was really excited because I'm like, man, I get to go home and get some of these to listen to myself. So these are a bit bright. They are detail forward, and whether that's your cup of tea or not, I think most people are going to appreciate just how cohesive and expansive that soundstage is. Now the song You and Your Friends by Dire Straits showcases so many of the unique traits that the NS-600A has immediately. I mean, you have in the first 10 seconds the most cohesive and impeccable soundstage, then immediately accompanied by the total depth and bass delivery from the bass guitar. It's like the first 10 seconds just hook you faster than so many other songs. So if you end up getting a pair of these, give that song a shot. Now, as the song carries in, you have the electric guitar filling in, and again, that is getting kind of thrown really wide in the room. It's very resolving and revealing, and it starts to show a little bit of the brightness and forwardness that I was talking about. It doesn't sound as laid back. Now, when the lead singer starts coming in, there's a little bit of breathiness to his voice. Again, it's supposed to sound more airy and light, but when you match that with the depth that the mid-bass driver has and how full everything sounds, it's not like it's a V-shaped speaker. It doesn't sound warm. It doesn't sound neutral and bright. It really has a very unique special blend of a touch of warmth and tonal richness that you want when you're listening to a wide range of music, and then there's some air and upper detail presence, if you will, that some other speakers lack in comparison. Now I want to compare it to a couple other speakers I have and have used more extensively just to kind of tie this in as well. So I have the Bowers 606 S2 bookshelf speakers. I've had them for a few years now. The biggest thing that it gets exposed on those speakers, especially when I got my Alta Audio Alyssa speakers and now these, is the matching and blending of the tweeter versus the mid-bass driver. And you can hear a clear disconnect as it crosses over. It doesn't sound as well blended together, and that's more common with less expensive speakers. As you pay more, you're paying a lot of the engineering that goes into blending frequencies from top down. So if you close your eyes, it's a single presentation of music as opposed to the tweeter's doing this and the woofer is doing this. Now those have a sparkly top end as well, but when you have that gap in the mid-range and then more of a punchy but lacking in depth of bass, it just doesn't sound as good. It's exposed in a lot of ways, but it's a typical brighter, British sounding speaker. It's just very punchy and high energy, but again, it doesn't have the same warmth or depth that this has. Now, what's funny enough is in my head, I kept telling myself these were $5,000 speakers. It's one of those things where I get some of the information. I don't like to read too much into it because I just want to play them. So when I was listening to it against my Alta Audio Alyssa speakers, in my head, I'm like, these are both $5,000. Which one do I like more? And it's a heavy answer because they have their different strengths. Now, when you get rid of the fact that they are very different prices, this is $3,000 versus $5,000, these still do some things I like more than the Alyssa. I think as far as overall stage and detail presence, if you will, filling the room with a very wide image, these are still the superior bookshelf speaker in that regard. Alta Audio just happened to target a different sound curve because they were trying to create certain types of live music reproduction. And the biggest difference with the Alta Audio Alyssa that I heard is the bass depth. Now those speakers are more expensive. It would have been better to compare the larger 800 series to those, but with their transmission line that they use, the XTL bass tube, they just seem to have deeper bass, but there's definitely a little bit more boxiness and heft to the bass. And depending on what you're listening to, you might want a little bit more clinical, neutral bass delivery. Their power handling is pretty immense. So if you have a larger room, then again, I would just consider the 800 or the Alyssas in that $5,000 range. But the tweeter on the Alyssa uses an AMT instead of a dome, and it has a much more narrow focus pattern as far as dispersion goes. So if you're not at the right viewing angle or height, you're going to have a lot more high frequency roll-off. So keep that in mind. This particular system is more lively, so it does kind of rely on your room to be set up decent enough to where you're not dealing with too many reflections or reverbs as well. With the sound signature being the way it is, I think some of it will come down to personal preference. I think that's always important to consider, that there's no absolute where one speaker is going to be perfect for everybody. So I never try to go with this review of saying this is the best in this price range, because you might want heavier bass, darker treble, for example. So the good news is if you need a boost bass, get the larger speaker or bring these closer to the wall. But as far as how they're put together and how cohesive the imaging is, that's something that I think most people will agree on, is blending in stage. You want to be able to close your eyes and not really place exactly where the source is. That's where some of the music, the magic happens with music. Now for home theater, they're incredible as well. I didn't have a center speaker to tie it into, but for movie reproduction, because that imaging is so good, that's helpful there as well. And because these are sold separately, you can technically just buy an extra NS-600, for example, if you want 3 matching ones up front. Or you can mix and match, maybe do 2 NS-600s for your rear channels, and then the NS-800 as a center, and then 2 NS-2000s for your floor standing speakers. That whole setup, because you want tonal balance, ideally you want to match it. But when you, again, factor in how well and tightly they image, it really helps for engrossment in the movie and feeling like you're there. in addition to being exceptional on the music side. Now, if I had to criticize anything, it's the fact that because they're a little bit brighter and more on the airy side, if you're listening to the wrong track at higher volumes, that can come across as a bit much. The energy is a little bit high. Now, there's a few ways to look at that. You have at lower volumes, that's actually a little bit preferred. There's something called the Fletcher Munson curve, which some people like. Stronger bass and stronger high frequency is more of a V shape on your sound profile. And then as you turn it up, you tend to want reduced lower bass and high frequencies, so it's a little bit more flat. It's just the way the human anatomy works, at least according to some studies. So I use this on several amplifiers. Now, I used it on the Yamaha SV237 Mark II, which is a hybrid tube amplifier. Amazing amp. The stage on that is just absolutely insane. But it's the stage so wide as it is that you don't always need something as tubey or vast sounding as that, as holographic, if you will. So what I really liked is I still have my Yamaha integrated amp that I reviewed in the past, and that has YPAO, which is room correction, and that does affect the bass and the treble tuning to an extent. When you run the mic calibration, it adjusts all of that. And when I turned it on and off, it does make a difference on what frequencies are stronger than others. And that helps tame a little bit of that edge that my room was bringing out of the speaker. So keep that in mind too. Your source gear will make a difference to an extent. But as far as how these are out of the box, if you just send them a flat, unmodified signal, they have a little bit of warmth to it, not much because it's still relatively clean, excellent depth. The mid-range tonality is incredibly natural sounding. Doesn't have any boxy resonance type to it, and the vocals don't sound thick like they're in a cardboard room, but it is just a little bit forward. It's a little bit bright, but not sharp or shouty in any way. It's just very revealing, almost like that whole upper registrar is just lifted slightly, and that does translate into metallic instruments as well. So that about wraps up the review. I hope you learned more about the NS600 today. I haven't really done a lot of speaker reviews in the past. It is something I'm going to be growing a lot going forward now. So if there's a format change that you think you want, or you want me to do something a little differently, I'm very open to criticism. Shoot me a comment below. Let me know what you're looking for out of this type of content and what would be more helpful for you, because I want to be a good resource for you. I can tell you this, I absolutely love these speakers in this room that I'm talking to you now in. They sound absolutely incredible. My dad happened to be visiting while I had all these speakers here for demo, and he fell in love with these. He wants to buy a set for his house, so we actually had a bonding moment over all this music stuff. It was really cool. I will have links in the description below to help you find this. I have no kickbacks or monetization set up. This was sent to me by Yamaha, so massive thanks to them. But it's not something I'm getting money for. I'm just, because I love this hobby. So I'll cover more speakers soon. I have a lot of stuff planned. But yeah, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I'd love to see you at the next video. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.